If I look up here, I kept that at 2 millimeters pretty much at the bottom, and then it tapered up, notched in, and tapered out again. So I'm going to just use a straight line tool, use my mouse. I'm going to click a little narrower than 2 millimeters and hold down the Shift key. Click somewhere in there. These become very difficult for me to address or assess without the symmetry tool. So I'm going to bring the symmetry tool in. I don't have a template line under here to work with, but I have the stone facets. That should be close enough. Because that'll give me a better maybe not quite that severe. I'm looking at how thick this is here. And mind you, this will get thinner with after casting and stuff. But if I'm looking at the overall thicknesses of things, that's actually a reasonable shank width to be playing with. It's important to have put that in because I need to draw how this becomes this. Because this actually is the shank. Okay. Now, we had several shank ideas going. One was that where this happens, the shank actually notches in. So to find where that is, drag down. Drag over. So, I am implying that this whole rigmarole blends into the shank coming down. It's dangerous. If I let it hang out there, it's going to be visible over the stone. And I don't want that. That maquette has to be listened to. That was the point of making it, was to listen to it. I will only bring it in here. And then I have the notch. And this is where the opening of this takes place. And this is where it becomes a challenge because this comes into something wider here. This whole thing kind of scares me. So there's that. this corner right here I need, because that's where the side of this runs parallel to the top and side of this. This is where it separates. Separates right there. And this gets to go on and be its own thing. Blending back into the shank. And this gives me this window that I do need to see. But the window's deceptive because there's a thickness of metal on the top of that arm as it comes up. And there's also a thickness of metal in here. This ends up being thicker than the prong. It goes in behind the prong. It ends right there. Canvas guides clear, view guides, clear guides. Okay, so you can see how complicated this has become. And it's still not accurate. I know it isn't, but it's more accurate. This split in the shank comes down to where this notching takes place. So I will just use a straight tool because it's silly not to. To make a straight line, I click and I hold shift down while I drag. Because mirroring is on that line, it's going to be a little bit thicker than I want it to be. That's okay, because it's going to double up, basically. This whole thing is substantially heavier than that whole thing. I'm not sure what I think of that. I don't necessarily hate it outright. But I do want to definitely feel this ramping down in. So my take on it now is that once again this runs behind the prong. Attaches into the prong here. I do want it to kind of act like it pretends it knows it's going along that half moon stone before it drops away. Gonna let that taper in. Just a little. No, I think it's too thin. Okay, that's good. So the only thing that's really bothering me is this little flag shape in here. I don't believe it. I just don't believe that it is honest. This looks much more to me like what goes on here. Now you notice I'm drawing hard corners all the time. That's why I told you in your maquettes to go ahead and leave angles and corners, because it helps you understand the form of the thing that you're making. This would not really go up much up behind here, but I'm going to let it go up behind there a little bit so it feels like it's grabbing that prong. It'll just make me happier. It's important that this comes down and joins in with that part of the shank. And what you see as I'm drawing this is that the side view of this is more thicknesses than fronts. But that's okay. That's what it would actually be. So, now I have this coming down in. This is narrowed up a little bit. I'm not going to embrace it completely. I'm just going to indicate, leave a ghost of it there, and then do my straight line tool. And that's pretty nice. That's not bad. Now what's funny is I had done some of this drawing with history on, with that on over there, so it flipped it all the way over here. M, marquee, cut. Okay, I'm going to copy and paste this over. Now, do I copy? I could copy all the way down and get the stone as well. And that's often a good way to make sure I've got things centered up. I'm going to do it. It'll make things a little more confusing at the end, but I'm going to do it. So Control-Shift-C, Control-Shift-V, so it pastes back in the same place. Edit, transform, flip horizontal. V so I can move it. And then I'm going to make it multiply so I can see well. Click on the canvas so that when I do this arrow key it doesn't change settings in here, it moves the piece. And I'm looking at the facet lines in the stone. Like I said, they're my best indication. And then turn it back to normal. And Control E to combine them. Okay, so I'm starting to get a real sense now for the design. I've turned the sketch off because I don't need it anymore. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. I want that to fade out. I don't want this ghost of a shading going on here. And I don't see the bottom of my ring being square in cross section. By the way, the actual finished ring will be about that thick at the bottom. That creates its own dilemma for me. Because as a CAD modeler, I need that extra thickness for it to be makeable. As a designer, that extra thickness is a lie. I'll address that in a minute. Okay. Going to get the symmetry out of my way. Bring it back over here. It's upsetting because once I move it, I see some things. I don't believe in this either. You can't undo positioning. Okay. So I'm going to grab this and move it back for just a minute. Close enough. Brush tool. See this big gap it shows here? In the front view, in the side view, you'd never see that. I just know that's true. And once again, all I'm doing, you're going to say, I know, you're going to tell me, well, how do I know? You don't. You have a choice. You either go on faith or you make a more and more detailed maquette until at the end you've got a finished ring. So I suggest that you just get the confidence to do it. The thing is just be aware that if this side view looks too different from this front view, that there's a problem. They have to be the same object. So if this curve doesn't seem to be that curve, you've got a problem. If this curve doesn't seem to be this curve, you've got a problem. Okay? If this and this don't look somehow copacetic, you have a problem. And once again, that doesn't look great. But then that looks too thin here. And in reality, I know that it probably comes up higher than goes down lower. But changing it going up higher is a problem for me because I have to erase all this stuff I've so carefully drawn. So I'm going to cheat and let it drop lower. No one's going to come at this with a micrometer at the end of the day. And if they do, they deserve what they get. So transforming the symmetry back over here again. So I can come back over here to work. Okay, there are a lot of things there that I like. It is starting to look like a finished design. Now that the symmetry is out of my way, I can soften that by hand. Okay. So, I kind of indicate that that's a side versus front scenario, just because it helps me understand what I'm looking at. Sorry, clean up some of the mess, because that sketch design was under there before, and this finished drawing was kind of depending on it for some things. Clean it up so it stands on its own. So it's time to put the other prongs in. I'm going to put a prong at the corner of the stone. V is kind of a bold statement, but it makes me more comfortable, so I will do that.